ThinkTech Hawaii from our conference room in the Davies Pacific Center. And we have Kevin Hughes and Dan Leuck joining us today. And we're going to talk about what just came up, a really exciting issue about digital initiative from Google, which could change the world. About a week ago, Google came out and said that it was unsatisfied with the speed of broadband in this country, and it was going to change all that. And if there's any private company that can make a statement like that, it's got to be Google. What is it, 184 billion now?
Yeah, their market capitalization is, right about there.
So my first question is, exactly what is Google saying, so everybody knows?
Google is saying that they are interested in forming testbed, high-speed, fiber optic-driven networks throughout the U.S. And they since February 10th, when they announced this, they've made public a number of sites on the web that people can go to get more information about the initiative, as well as forums from which people involved in the municipalities and governments, as well as the community, can enter in a request for proposals for their community.
So who's going to pay, Kevin?
Who is going to pay? Well, that would be Google, because...
Really?
Well, why not? Everything that Google has launched in the last 10 years has been a product of theirs, has been an offshoot of theirs. They've taken the financial reins on all of these projects. I see no reason for them to not do so, especially given that this initiative is really about establishing testbed areas. Not necessarily anything entrenched or anything with partnerships with the local interests per se, but more of a way to get this experimental technology in the hands of communities to figure out how that impacts the company, how that impacts users, how they use their products differently, how they might interact differently. They want to know this information. They're interested. And really, who better than them? They have the money and they have the reputation.
Can they do it?
Oh, yeah, they can certainly do it. Google's actually been buying dark fiber for many years. And it looks like they're looking at doing basically a subsidy model. So Google is going to pay for a lot of the infrastructure, and they've stated that they're going to make the gigabit connectivity available to people at prices competitive with what they're currently paying for broadband. So they couldn't do that in a business model where they were looking to make money from this. So it's they're subsidizing it essentially.
So how much faster is that? I mean, in terms of the average user, the average Roadrunner user, for example, than what I have now?
On their site, they say that for most people, they're looking at speeds about 100 times faster. In Hawaii, it would actually be a much larger increase than that. As Kevin mentioned in the points that he put together, Hawaii is one of the worst states in terms of average speed of connectivity. Mm-hmm. We average around 300 kbps down and about just under 700 kbps up. By comparison, Rhode Island, which is number one, is about 10,000. So for us, it would actually be closer to a 300-time increase. A gigabit is a billion bits. So you're talking about moving a billion bits per second over the world.
So how is this going to match up against, say, the 11 megabits that I can get theoretically from Hawaiian Telecom right now?
For one thing, as part of this initiative, I would suspect that Google would provide this for free. They have the money and the equipment and the power to do that for an experimental initiative at least. Now, whether they want to go beyond that, whether they will open it up to commercial partners in the future, I don't know. It's up to them. But for now, I see no indication that they will do it currently. They might, but I don't know at this point.
How do you, in fact, do it? I mean, if you're Google and you have, whatever you want, you have your shopping bag all filled up now, how do you make this happen? Technologically, do you have to put new wire down? Do you have to put little boxes on the wire? How do you make it happen?
Well, that's a good question. They might actually do that. They probably, once they've selected their testbed communities, they will work with local contractors to connect the fiber to the main areas, determine what infrastructure is already in the area, and provide the equipment to make it happen.
It occurred to me that when you get so fast, then the whole world changes. What I mean
Sure.
is, now you guys both write software, you both deal in websites, you're both interested in speed and connectivity and access and all that. But now all of a sudden you have a gigabit. How does your world change, and how does my world as a user change?
It changes in a lot of really profound ways. When you have that kind of speed, a lot of the work that people like Kevin and I have to do is just optimizing, making things as small as possible. And a lot of times that means sacrificing quality. If you're embedding video, you have to compress the video so it's small. And
We at ThinkTech know
and
about
ThinkTech,
that.
we know all about
yeah.
that too. That's true. When you're dealing with people that are connecting at that speed, it allows you to take your ideas and make them happen without having to filter everything through the reality lens of, but it has to be delivered over these slow networks. So you're talking about very high quality HD video, 3D interfaces, all kinds of amazing applications for telemedicine and remote education, especially in places like Hawaii where we are spread out across these islands. Think about what UH can do if they can bring large high definition video, if they can stream that to people along with all kinds of tools and 3D interfaces and the ability to pan around a classroom or a lab. There's a lot of exciting possibilities.
So it's software, but it's also looking the larger vision.
Oh yes.
How does the world change?
Well, the web is an extension of our brains. Imagine if all your life you could only understand a word a second, and everything you read and everything you saw and everything that was communicated to you came in at this rate, and all of a sudden now those gates have been lifted, and now everyone can communicate to you much, much faster. Not just that, but you can communicate to them much, much faster, and you both understand each other while that is happening. It's just a great shift in reality, in a sense. We've been hobbled by the low speed connections at the home for many years. My whole time as a software engineer in the industry, I've always dealt with issues of bandwidth. That's why images on the web have to be small and a certain size, why you have to design websites a certain way, why we have Java and Flash that's limited to doing software techniques that limit the rate of things. Once that's lifted, we don't have to think about all the things we have to do to limit things anymore. We can now actually begin writing software and creating new kinds of communication that are not limited by how fast it can get from my brain to your brain. It's a huge shift.
What about the number of people whose brains would be involved? It strikes me that if you had this kind of new speed all around, say, this country, let's just talk about this country, you could strap the whole country together. You could have a couple of 100 million people, 250 million people on the line all at the same time. You'd have to write some really sophisticated software to do that, but you could have large numbers of people collaborating as never before. Isn't that true?
Well, that's a very interesting point you bring up. What high-speed communications and software applications will do is they'll start putting the pressure on hardware makers to provide computing infrastructure to catch up to those speeds. Super high-speed video chips, decoding, encoding chips, fast CPUs, storage, hard drives, all of that will have a great pressure on it to really evolve to meet the size of this channel. So it's really a win-win situation. It's a rising tide that can lift all boats, so to speak.
Yeah, well, but what you talk about is new hardware, new software. We get to concept change too, but hardware and software, all new, all at the same time, that sounds like a boom. It sounds like an economic boom to me, don't you think?
Yes.
Sounds like it's time to buy stock in Cisco.
It's just this in the same days when people had horses and were walking around, and all of a sudden, oh look, there's this new thing called the train, And back when it was invented, people said it's absolutely impossible for a human being to travel faster than 30 miles an hour.
I remember reading that people theorized you couldn't breathe if you got going faster than that. You
Sure.
couldn't catch the air was sort of the concern.
Right. We have nothing to fear and everything to gain from this.
So you guys, as software developers and tech leaders, you're always looking, to the next chapter, of course, and you're doing that, in a capitalist kind of way. So I know it's hard to predict right now, but let's assume with me that this really happens. Assume with me that it happens in a reasonable time frame. And I'd like to know your view of what time frame that would be. How do you change your company? How do you make a buck on this? Aside from investing in Cisco, of course.
Well, there's all kinds of applications that will be enabled that you can't do today. So it allows us, for example, our creative team, a lot of times the way that a process works, an interactive design process, you have a creative team that has all these fantastic ideas, and then the engineers tell them what they can't do. And so what this enables is the creative team coming up with all these fantastic ideas that involve things like multi-point video communication and all kinds of beautiful designs, and the engineers will be able to say, yes, we can do that. And for us, that's huge.
The engineer that says yes.
Exactly. Yeah, the engineers can start saying yes.
It opens up the ability to radically redistribute resources, being that if you have a large pipe to your house, you can put your business in your house. A server in every room. It can have all of your information on it or not, as you choose. It can be your link to all the video of the world, your audio library, everything in a tiny little box that goes in a world that the world looks at, that you send to the world, and that the world sends back. And with that creates a lot of opportunities for people to work at home, really radical opportunities. Instead of having to have your server in a data rack in Houston, or instead of having to keep it at the office, now it's at home. So it starts to encourage new kinds of legislation and social thinking about allowing people to work where they want to work. Maybe if you have these fiber optic connections, this high speed ability to get information from anywhere, it doesn't really matter where it's coming from. A corporate server could be easily in someone's kitchen as it is in a skyscraper.
That kind of reverses a trend, doesn't it? I mean, I've thought, you guys are much closer to it, but I've thought that servers were becoming consolidated, and that one day there would be a little box about that big on the top of a mountain in Colorado probably that would have all of the data that all of us ever needed in this little box.
Utility.
Sort of protected,
Right.
lots of concrete, like, the facility at the airport here. But you're saying that would go the other way.
Well, you have the opportunity to go the other way, because now there's so much speed between these little boxes, they're not scarce anymore. The boxes can be cheap. If you want to back it up, boom, backup, instant, anywhere. Oh, I have this box in my kitchen. Yes, it has my whole digital life, but I have 30 other backups randomly scattered around the world in here, and I can just call up any one of them in a second.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this positions companies like Google, not coincidentally, and Amazon very well, because they have the largest, most efficient clouds. And their clouds are already spread all over the world, actually. Amazon's now moved
something that's spread. A cloud is by definition spread.
It is.
You don't know or care exactly where it is.
Yeah, I mean, you can have a cloud of 2 computers. It's just a very small cloud. And Google has a cloud of thousands and thousands of computers spread all over the world, actually. Amazon as well. They've gone into Asia now. So if you're using Amazon's cloud services, one of the problems we had previously was just how far away people were from the machines that compose the cloud. But now for our customers in Japan, it's not a problem. They're everywhere. And so you have these the basic resources that you have in computing, storage and processing power and these things, you'll be able to very easily provision and have instantaneous access to.
So what about SaaS? Sounds like to me having a lot of software on your local client machine wouldn't be necessary if you could connect up instantaneously at a gigabit to anywhere in the world, or at least
Absolutely.
anywhere
Well,
in the Google range, the Google zone.
Right.
It becomes more about what the software does rather than where it is. So I think business models would have to change to take advantage of that.
Of course, you guys will be right on top of that.
Well,
I know
who
you.
knows? We try.
That's the plan. Again, software as a service. Guess who's very well positioned to take advantage of that?
Well, you're the guy who originally introduced me to that, so you told me about it.
Yeah, right. Google has some great offerings, and they're getting better all the time. Locally, we already see organizations like Punahou having switched over to Google Apps, and there's discussion of it happening at the state level. And that would save us a lot of money. So I'm definitely rooting for that to happen sooner rather than later.
So this is not without huge prospective benefit to Google. Google would become,
It's enlightened self-interest.
of course,
Shall we say?
we don't do evil, right?
But it's good in that if they are here, not only will they spur innovation, but also competition.
That's true.
A lot of people and companies look at Google, people in markets that Google has moved into. It's spurred them on. It's made them realize, oh, we actually haven't done anything really new or interesting in the last few years. Let's step it up.
Yeah, I think they're a facilitator of markets and of new markets. If you look at, again, going at Google Apps, they've opened it up to third parties. And there's a lot of really interesting applications being developed by other companies that are deployed onto Google Apps layer, which is on top of the Google Cloud. So, and there's a very good chance with this connectivity, if Google continues to invest in the infrastructure, they've been a big proponent of net neutrality, that they may allow other ISPs to come and play on top of their infrastructure and compete amongst themselves. So,
It's more than just an ambition here. This is a view of a major, by many multiples of Google's influence in the world. If this happens the way I think it might happen.
Right. I think it will happen eventually, but Google wants to jumpstart it.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And
right.
which
We were
is-
bound for another generation, so now it's right in front of us.
Right. And I have to emphasize that this initiative, when they first launched information around this, they explicitly mentioned that they were looking not just for government input, but also community input. And it's very important to them. We understood through the local papers that Lingle and the administration were very gung-ho about it and getting into it. But we realized, according to what Google was saying, they were also looking for public input. So what we're trying to do is fulfill the public side of that, the community-driven side of that.
They couldn't have found better guys than you to do this.
Well,
We have to remember-
self-selecting.
we have to
Self-selected,
We have to
right.
pay Jay his $100 at the end of the month here.
So I want to know, so you guys stepped up to the plate, and that's really fantastic. Because, there was a vacuum out there, and just because the governor said something doesn't mean that the community was necessarily going to activate. You guys have stepped up to the plate, and you're trying to activate the community. I want to know why you stepped up, and I want to know what you're doing to activate the community.
Well, what the state has said they're doing is excellent.
What are they doing?
Well, they have contacts, as mentioned there's an article that came out in the Advertiser just about 5 days ago that mentioned they had high-level contacts at Google, that they are communicating with them, that they are quote-unquote all over it.
I believe that was...
Good.
Now, given Google's predisposition to wanting different kinds of input, what we've done is we've set up an online petition site for the public to go there and endorse their support of the Google Gigabit Initiative. In particular, endorse their support of bringing that initiative to Hawaii as one of the testbed communities. And I think that working together, both the community and the state and local government can, as I like to say, deliver a 1-2 punch to Google that will be absolutely
Possible to ignore.
impossible to ignore.
So suppose we make by the way, I was the 22nd guy that signed that petition.
Ah, excellent.
I should have made a printout so I could frame it later, you know.
Before we forget, the easiest way to get there right now, and we'll probably provide an easier URL shortly, but if you just go to TechHui.com, so that's TechHui.com, there's a great sprout with 5 points that Kevin penned right on the front page in the middle, and you can click through there to find the petition. And we do invite people to sign up. There's it was just launched a couple days ago. There's a little over 300 people. To make an impression on Google, we really need to get that in the tens of thousands. So we do really encourage people to go there and do that, and to get all their friends and family to do the same.
We put it on ThinkTech Hawaii too.
Excellent.
Your
And you can grab that sprout.
Your widget sprout.
Yes, you can grab that sprout and stick it on your blog and on your sites. That's very helpful.
Yes,
as
and
well.
we will be releasing press release shortly to a number of community groups.
So, okay, we got the petition. We're going to have 100,000 people on that petition.
Yes.
Great.
We got the governor doing everything she can possibly do.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly the tech community will respond, and maybe the peripheral tech community will respond. But with all of that, what does that mean for this initiative? What does that mean for Hawaii? Suppose we have a great showing. What happens then?
Oh, well, the possibilities multiply. For one thing, Google will close its request for proposals on March 26th.
For everybody.
For everybody. So we have now until the 26th to get as much public support as we can locally behind that. Now, even no matter what size of supporters that sign on to the petition or state their support, and no matter what happens to Google, we now have a mailing list of people who are interested in bringing high-speed networking to Hawaii. We've never had any kind of public support or mandate or any indication of any sort of interest at all in this world. So even if nothing happens from Google's perspective, we now have the beginnings of a public community to begin that discussion and say, hey, maybe this is something that's really worth.
Yeah, I agree. I think we have a real shot. We have a shot because I've talked to some people, and I was kind of disappointed to learn that people thought, oh, it's Hawaii, it's not going to happen. We're not going to get it. And I think that's not true. I think we have a real shot for a number of reasons. One is we're close to the bottom, 48th currently in terms of average connectivity down and up. So I think that we're clearly in need, and our state needs it more than any other state. I'd say we're number one in terms of how important connectivity is, because we are the most isolated island chain in the world, and the most dependent on imports. The logistics of Hawaii make it hard to do lots of types of businesses, but we can stand toe-to-toe with mainland, anyone on the mainland, in terms of web-based businesses, for example. So I think for business it's very important, and for medicine and delivery of education, because of our unique geography, it's really critical. I think, so we're number one in terms of needs, and we're number 48th in terms of how close we are to meeting those needs. So I think we are a good candidate for the project.
So what are the parameters? I mean, what would turn Google on? What would make them select us? What do they want to see?
They want to see a populace that has the ability to use a lot of different and new exciting software applications. They want to see interest from the community. They want to see these networks being used in new and interesting ways within and without people's houses. And Hawaii, for many reasons, is an ideal place for that. You know, we're an island. If we have to learn to be sustainable, we have to learn to think smarter. We are a microcosm of the rest of the world. If we can't make that happen on this rock, no one else can make it happen on their vast expanses of land they have elsewhere in the world.
So we're the laboratory.
We
Yeah.
are the
That's
laboratory.
a very positive thing for us in terms of experiment.
In a sense, we are the world's laboratory. Hawaii's geography has brought about the need for networking for decades. It's where AlohaNet, the precursor to Ethernet,
I remember.
was invented. It's,
Right.
it's where we pioneered a lot of early uses of distance learning technologies.
So, the problem, I remember, year 1998, 99, we had, relatively speaking, very fast broadband here, relative to the rest of the world.
Yeah, we
the
did.
rest of the country, and something went wrong.
We kind of sprinted out ahead, and then,
Yeah.
there was this we sort of atrophied then
Yeah.
by comparison.
So what happened? Why did it, I'm really interested in why did it not keep up? What happened to come off the shelf that way? We didn't do so well. And once we find out the answer to that question, maybe we'll find out the flip side about how we can make a point here in this Google initiative.
Well, there's a lot of time, when the cable companies and the telephony companies had to think about, okay, how do we get web access to people's houses? And that took some time.
Yeah.
In this community, we were not heavily connected to areas with a lot of tech know-how, and all that equipment has to be shipped into the islands, all of those cable boxes, all of those switches, everything. So during that time, we had to ramp up to build that infrastructure. Meanwhile, Silicon Valley and the rest of the world was building software to take advantage of the new high speeds that were in the rest of the US at the time. And everyone kind of hit a plateau here. There aren't a lot of providers at the variety of price points I think that average people need. It's not in comparison to the mainland, and certainly not in comparison to Japan and many other countries, European countries that have so much consumer choice in terms of price and service compared to the U.S.
So if we score and we show Google that we're serious, that we're early adopters, we're innovative, this will have a huge effect and a positive effect on us, what do they do for us then? We win the brass ring.
Mm-hmm.
What is the brass ring exactly?
Well, the brass ring is gigabit connectivity, which enables.
They make it happen. So Dan, if you can show us that Hawaii's a good place, we're going to come and make it happen.
What they've said in the RFI is that they will come in and they will facilitate. They didn't get into the specifics of how they're going to go about doing it, but this is Google. If they say they're going to do it, they're going to do it. And that they will make that connectivity available to us at prices comparable to what we currently pay for broadband.
Wow.
Yeah. And
They don't have to make a new undersea cable.
no, they wouldn't have to make a new undersea cable. There would have to be some infrastructure work that would be done. I assume that they would work in partnership with local vendors to make that happen and essentially subsidize it and sort of direct it. Then it's up to, in terms of what we do with that, that's kind of back in our court. I'm sure that Google will be providing new things through their new software as a service sort of things to us, but it's up to UH to do innovative things with the remote education. It's up to our hospitals, and they're already doing good work there to do the telehealth.
Well, it's up to you
and,
guys.
and up to us, to companies, to make innovative new services, available to people.
But wouldn't it would be a boom for sure in terms of software.
It would be enormous for us. I think it's important for people to realize, and I think when you hear all these numbers being thrown around, it's hard to understand, relative to what we currently have, how different this is. So this is hundreds of times faster. You're talking about being able to download a feature-length movie in 5 minutes. I don't think that's the most important application, but it helps people to understand the difference. It's the ability to bring someone to have real presence in the room, to project them at life size and high definition on a wall, to have amazing new sorts of minority report type interfaces for things. I mean, it's going to be exciting.
Well, that goes to my next area of inquiry with you guys. So you go out with social networking and petitions online and all this, and you're trying to get public interest. So how many petition signatories do we have right now?
302.
Okay, we need more.
We
We
need,
need multiples, we need
We need-
logarithmic multiples.
Yes.
yes,
Yes.
And we need those people to understand what you're saying, that this will change the world, that
It will.
their quality of life and business will be remarkably better.
absolutely. It's not for geeks. It's not something that every techie in Hawaii should go out and sign. It's something that every individual in the state should sign because it will directly affect their quality of life.
So, press release, we'll put this up for sure.
Great.
What else? You have your social networking viral community out there?
We've all been out, yeah, kind of pumping the network. And the usual suspects, the group of techies that always support this are coming on and supporting it. But there's only a few thousand of us, and there's 1.3 million people in the state. We need to get people outside of the tech community to participate.
Well, it's so important. I'm just thinking myself, how we do this, and I think it's probably a matter of getting the media
Yes,
involved.
we could get a lot of Eric. I want to say thank you to Erica from the Star Bulletin for going out there with that article really early on. That was great. But we need more help from the stations, from the papers, from the local rags to really help pump this.
Yeah, on prime time.
Absolutely.
So when's the deadline? March 26th.
March 26th.
So we have our March 18th program.
Yes,
Hope you're going to come to that, Kevin.
That would be a nice recap.
Okay.
absolutely.
Dan is presenting in that. He's one of the panel members.
I'll be doing some interpretive dance. So.
Okay. I want to. We'll have a mob just to see that. So you guys, you're both going to benefit, but what about the tech industry in general? This sort of travels along the same route that the broadband speed did back in the late '90s. It was hot. Guys like you came back, and lots of people that came back. They were going to start the tech industry, and then it sort of bobbled a little bit and it slowed down, and they got out of tech and went into real estate. I could name names about that. And we went to, there was more talk about life sciences and biotech than there was about information tech. Then next time you looked, there was more talk about energy than there was about life sciences. So we go down from soundbite to soundbite, and here we are, and we're back to talking about information technology and broadband. We seem to be focusing on that. So do you see signs of new life in the IT community now? Both you guys are leaders in that community. Do you see other people coming along who would be directly involved in this initiative?
I think that there's renewed hope for 2010. I think that there's, I'm excited about things that have happened, for example, with the Hawaii Science and Technology Council. I'm really excited about Kekipua. I think she's doing great work. And when I talk to my colleagues, I do think that there is a real hope that 2010 will be a much better year than the past two, which were, a rough go for everyone, not just tech folks.
I'm mostly encouraged by private efforts like what the HMSA has done to offer up telemedicine capabilities to its members. Applications like that being started now are the people that are driving the development of applications like that here will be the people that will greatly benefit and lead the way for similar projects in Hawaii.
Yeah, I know about that. It's remarkable. I hope it's doing well, because it had a certain amount of resistance in the community, in the medical community. But I think it's a great idea. The guys who put it together are really good.
They are.
But imagine if a doctor could, a patient could call up a doctor, and now it's like being there. It's high resolution. You can show them what's happening.
Right.
You get the sense of the patient, of their state. It's quite a new quality of experience that this would enable.
What's interesting is you can export. In other words, if we refine this, again, the laboratory, right? The information technology lab, we refine that the HMSA Medical Doctor and You program. What's the difference between getting that kind of advice here or getting that kind of advice in Singapore or Malaysia or India, whatever. I mean, it's going to be global, don't you think?
Yeah, none aside from language.
Yeah,
But,
well, that's true. Thank you. Thank you for that. You got to work.
but,
But remember, 1 billion people speak English. You know?
Yeah, this is true. I mean, with telehealth, it's particularly good for preventative medicine, which is the best kind, the best sort. And in island chains in Hawaii, obviously, it's challenging. You can't have a specialist in every area on Molokai. You can't. So this enables us to develop a new level, to provide a new level of medical service to those people. And if you look at other Pacific Island locations, countries, we just recently returned from Fiji. They have people, permanent populations on 106 islands. And the ability to provide high quality preventative medical advice and care to those people, it's life changing for millions of people.
We're involved. My firm is involved in a video deposition now between here and Boston this week. We're going to take this deposition, and you have to make arrangements, and you have to get a special room. And I'm thinking that this Gigabit Initiative is going to change all of that, and that we'll be able to have video conferences with anybody, anytime, essentially for free. And it's not just video conferences for depositions either,
Right.
Or medicine. It's everything.
Yeah.
Well, it's not that it's not for free. There will be a cost to businesses and consumers alike.
All right.
But what you get,
dollar
what you get for the dollar,
Yeah.
will be magnitudes greater than you do today.
Okay.
Once it's the importance of creating an infrastructure like this, it's just as important as figuring out the first shipping lanes to Hawaii in terms of importance to the state and the economy. It's once you have something like that, now the state can start focus on providing to the rest of the world sources of information that the rest of the world feels important. Now you can, once that's done, you can start really think about what we need to do here to make Hawaii worth it to the rest of the world.
Exporting information.
To
Becoming an exporter.
to turn the economy from being one that's focused on importing goods and the things we need to survive, and one focused on exporting intellectual capital. We have departments here which are experts in tropical diseases to speak to,
Sure.
telemedicine uses and what Hawaii can
Sure.
bring there.
Sure.
We are a shining jewel in the world's cultures in terms of art and dance and Native Hawaiian history and stories and the traditions here that we can now communicate to the rest of the world in its all its glory in a way it's never been done before. It's just it makes the pipes turn the other way.
Yeah. We could change everything. But I worry, and I want to ask you the dark side of this. What happens if we don't get it? What happens if Google's not interested? That Google doesn't find enough energy out here on this issue, and it says we're going somewhere else, guys.
It'll just happen slower, and it's much better for us if it happens sooner. So it won't be the end of the world. The sky's not going to fall, but it will be longer before people can have these sorts of new types of high-tech telemedicine and remote education and these sorts of things. So it would be very unfortunate. We should endeavor to not have that happen.
Well, it's all another aspect of the same thing is it's the parade notion. You were referring to it earlier, Kevin. Is part of the process of the whole campaign and the petition and all that is to show that there's a central group of people that care about this. So just suppose hypothetically we had 100,000 people marching down King Street on a Friday afternoon with signs that says, "We really care about fast broadband."
Well, you know what? Even if it's
Make it
10,000,
Okay.
even if it's 5,000,
Okay.
that's still 0.5% of the population of the state.
It's not that many. Yeah.
You would not be able to say the same of any other state
Right.
Yeah.
providing a similar proposal.
Yeah, if it's under 5,000, we'd have to do something radical to get more attention. They'd probably have to be naked or something.
Well, there it is. But you know, I mean, to me, I think that regardless of what Google ultimately does on this, it's your point originally. It's a great statement that we can make, and it will be remembered whatever happens that people got together,
Yeah.
and made the statement, and we care about it, and we do care about innovation. We want to be a world center of information, and we want to export information. This is a great new model for us, so we can't
It is.
afford not to do it. I worry about the other dark side. That's the dark side of doing nothing about nothing and letting it all pass us by.
Yeah, apathy is not the right, I mean, that's the real danger here. People should realize no matter what you're doing, what your profession is, what island you're on, this has the potential to really positively impact your quality of life, your connectivity to your family members. Most of us have family members on other islands or on the mainland or Japan. So this will affect you directly. So today, sign the petition, and at a minimum, get everyone in your household to sign it.
So this has a social effect, doesn't it? It's more than just getting excited and having a parade. This could have an effect on the way Hawaii works in terms of its social and economic structure.
You know, in Hawaii, people in communities that don't typically have as much access, there are computers in the libraries, there are computers in the schools. We're just involved in a project where the Army and Apple came in and put computers in a host of schools out on the Waianae coast. Homeless people in Hawaii have access to the web through the efforts of Hawaiian Hope. The Kaka'ako homeless shelter here has a computer lab. And you can bet if they do. They've done some great work there. The reason was we have about 4,000 kids on Oahu that are members of homeless families, and they couldn't complete their homework because some homework now requires web access. And so, think about,
It's so bizarre. They live on the beach and they go to school and have, the other part of their life seems normal, but they're living
They
on
have
the beach.
email addresses.
They do.
Oh my goodness.
They do.
That's
Absolutely.
We got to do something about all of this,
Maybe they can sign the petition.
Yes.
Well, the thing
Talk to
about-
Hawaiian Hope about that.
Do you remember The Smart Mob? It was a book about the effect of people using social networking. This must be 7 or 8 years ago, and having political effect. And the story that I remember always is an Eastern European city in a slightly repressive country, and the city square is empty. And at 2 o'clock, all of a sudden, 100,000 people come in the square, all with an ice cream cone. Every one of them is vanilla ice cream cone. And at 2:07, they all leave again. And the police are standing there wondering what happened. Could this be some enormous coincidence, or could it be a political statement? So I think the world changes when you strap people together in large numbers. And conceivably, it raises the consciousness of Hawaii, the political consciousness, to have everybody online.
Absolutely.
An analogy I like to make is if you see the internet as an extension of one's nervous system, the things like ad mobs or flash mobs are kind of like seeing two brain cells connect to each other for the first time. There's accelerated activity, and then they figure out how to talk together, and then it kind of dies down. It's like that. The world as a whole is just learning how to communicate together and gel and interesting in different ways.
So does the Google initiative cover other countries, or is it just the U.S.?
I believe the RFI stated that this is a U.S. initiative. I imagine if it goes well, though, that Google's been investing heavily, for example, in Japan, where they're not the dominant player. In Japan, Yahoo captures most searches. But I believe Google grew 5% in that market over last year, and much more than that in terms of Google applications. So I would expect they'd probably follow up with something in Japan or in Western Europe.
So you think that, well, it sounds like they're doing the U.S. first.
I believe
And
so.
That's
I'd have to verify
appropriate,
that.
American company. But ultimately, it's easy to take what you learned here in terms of the process and move it to any country.
Absolutely.
You think they'll
Yeah.
move it to China?
I don't. At least not in the short term.
Thought I'd ask.
I think they're hoping for some regime change there.
Well, you have to be careful where the information pipes go.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. China, does, right, it hasn't had the best record in terms of government respecting people's privacy there.
How is that doing, by the way? The last I heard was Google had threatened to pull out, did they?
Well, they've already shut off some services. We have a colleague that was traveling in China, and it was interesting. She said in Beijing and in Shanghai, she was not able to access Google applications, but in Hong Kong she was. So it looks like maybe some of the special economic zones it's still available, but not in the rest of the country, is what it looks like. I don't know exactly what they've shut off and what they haven't, but they're clearly starting to make good on their. I don't want to say threat, but their statement that China has to start playing ball, or they're going to pull certain things out.
You agree with me, don't you, that ultimately Google will win this little tete-a-tete? Why? I mean, my analysis is that everyone in the world has seen the enormous power and value of it, and they're going to want it. And they also see that the enormous power and value is to cross boundaries, to go somewhere far away and get information from that place.
Right.
And that sort of grows a society right in front of you. It's amazing what happens. So the people in China are not going to tolerate losing this.
I don't know if you guys, I agree. If you saw the photos of the Google sign in Google China where people had come in, they left flowers all around it, huge
really?
amounts of flowers. Yeah, I think it's important when you're talking about China to make a distinction between the Chinese people and the Communist Party.
Sure.
And there's a lot of Chinese people that don't want to see Google go, clearly.
But if that's right, if the people in China and any other place that has some exposure to this will want it and continue to want it for the quality of their lives, then we'll have a web that goes over the whole world at rapid speeds.
Mm-hmm.
So the things that we invent here will be useful everywhere.
Yes, I do think it's important to note though that Google, in China, Google is not the predominant player. Baidu, of course, is the prominent player.
60%.
So the Chinese internet doesn't screech to a halt if Google leaves, but it is damaged.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, my feeling though is that if you look at the whole world and you see that ultimately, it may not be right away, there may be hiccups along the way, but ultimately we'll all be strapped together, and you realize that's the largest market ever conceived.
It is in
The
terms of
whole world is a
eyeballs.
market.
Yeah. Oh, you're talking about China or the
whole world.
Yes. that's
Everywhere,
true.
every place you can think of.
Yes.
So what kind of a market is that, for example, for Sprout? I mean, my goodness,
Well-
now your market, it goes way beyond the US.
Well, where a lot of, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of what we do in software is kind of trying to limit the rate at which, trying to deal with very slow rates of information. I see a shift to us trying to figure out how to limit the rate of information going in. Filters, software filters, things that encompass a lot of very rich media. Certainly, it kind of changes the notion of a website when you can have a tiny little widget on a page, but you can click on it and open up, and all of a sudden there's a high-speed video archive inside. Or it has the exact same user interface as anything on your desktop.
Not that big.
But in terms of space on the screen, it takes that much
Amazing,
amount and it's
truly
just
amazing.
portable.
Yeah. You guys were really visionary on that, by the way.
Thanks.
I'm beginning to understand now how visionary you were.
Well, we're trying. We're still trying to make it in the startup life, and we're always looking for peers like Dan and other companies and talent to bring here. It's going to be an ongoing adventure.
That's a really good point. Another byproduct of Hawaii being chosen, it will enable companies that are already here to do a lot more and to grow, and new companies to form. And it would be great to bring some of that talent that we've bled from our state back home.
Yeah, no, that's the real payoff if we can do that. So this is the thing that makes it possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, you can invite your friends to come back.
That's right.
And you can make an industry. And I don't know if 221 is critical, but you create a 221 kind of environment, where the IT guys are saying,
It's a 6-letter word now. Call it something different.
Well, I know it's been pretty contentious, and I've had personal experience on both sides of the coin with 221 and such incentives. I've been in startups which have been helped greatly by it, but on the other hand, you could argue that prolonging one's life through tax credits is not appropriate for a startup. It should, if it doesn't have a good idea, it should fail as fast as possible and move on to the next thing. On the other hand, I've been involved in areas where 221 could not apply to our case because of improper or imprecise reading of the law, or rather improper policy enforcement. So I have to be neutral about it. But what I would like to see rather are incentives for businesses that are in the business of exporting intellectual capital, businesses that do not depend on physical goods, physical manufacturing, that do not depend on heavy importation of things, that produce less pollution. All of this ties into the overall sustainability and innovation vision, but looking at it from a larger standpoint, we should be in the information production business here.
Yeah.
Yes.
As the new economy, a wonderful new economy.
And there are actually some bills right now that are being discussed that would benefit, not the 221 model, not the tax credit model. Most of the leaders in the legislature have said tax credit type systems aren't things that they want to hear about, and that's understandable. So there's the fund of funds that's being discussed. For people that service the state government, there's a discussion of a price preference that would be similar to what the construction industry currently has, that really just offsets our penalty from the G tax when bidding against California companies, for example.
I like that one.
I do too. So some great work by Senator Fukunaga and Representative McKelvey and Representative Ward in that area. It was great to see them working together with the Tech Caucus to come up with those bills.
What can they do, if anything, to help on this statement for the Gigabit Initiative? Maybe a resolution? What do you think?
They could sign on as supporting groups into the petition. So we encourage as many community groups, whether they be in state or private or public, to sign on as supporting organizations of the petition.
Yes. All you have to do is, we've set up an address that you can email. It's gigabithi@techhui.com, and if you want to be listed as a supporting organization, just let us know, and we'll add you to the petition. It'll appear right at the bottom of the petition.
I gotta say, you guys were so quick. You know, we at ThinkTech said, wow, somebody's gotta step up to this. Who will it be? and we turned around and there you were.
Yeah.
It's not just a tech statement. It's a society statement. It's a policy statement. It's a community statement. It's a political statement.
Right. This is a model for getting local support.
Absolutely.
For anything. And if we can show that maybe this is successful, other groups, not just in high tech, but other groups can make use of this.
Other issues.
Here.
Absolutely.
You know, I almost wish that we could go back before they trounced the super ferry, and we had this kind of, you know, public rising up over a given issue, and we found out, you know, what people thought about it, and they came forward and they expressed themselves. It would have been useful for the government to know at that time.
Yeah, Hawaii has had it's been pretty tough. There's been a lot of political apathy in Hawaii. I think with Obama, that clearly, you know, changed, and hopefully we'll keep that momentum. But I think when government can engage people through rich media, which would be greatly enhanced by this gigabit network, we can get people more excited about these things and really hear what people think about these kinds of issues.
Yeah, I mean, Obama talks about democracy 2.0. Hear about that?
Mm-hmm.
So that means real-time political process
Right.
with everyone.
Right. You can think of it as a community impact statement.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that if you do that, you change the way democracy works, because you're bypassing all those levels and impediments. You're talking to you right now, and you're talking back right now. Mm-hmm. And the whole, like I say, strapped together, you know, in one political entity. Wow, and that's possible, much more possible with this Gigabit Initiative.
Absolutely.
And I have to say, Hawaii has in the past has had very good marks in terms of its online government rankings, the amount of services offered online compared to other states.
That's true.
In the past, it was one of the first cities. Honolulu was one of the first cities to put its data on Google Transit. You know, it's things like that.
I agree. I think if there was a metric for sort of innovation per capita, Hawaii would score well.
Yeah, increasingly, I think, actually, over the past few years. So what would you like to leave with our listeners?
Sign the petition. At a minimum, get everyone in your household to sign the petition. If you're on Twitter, if you're on Facebook, tell people about it. And it doesn't matter if you're a techie. It will affect everyone in the state.
If you want to make Hawaii a better place, it only takes one press of a button. If you want something, make it happen. Don't have to argue about it or talk about it. Just do it. Just
That's right.
do it.
Just do it.
Kevin Hughes, Dan Leuck, thank you so much for coming by.
Pleasure.
Wonderful discussion. We'll do it again, right? Promise me.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Thank you.